All right. Welcome in. I know a few of you are starting to join live. This is an impromptu live I'm doing this afternoon. I thought it might be fun to do so. It's the last day of our early bird sale for the upcoming year one course. So I thought that I would come on and do a little impromptu Q&A, take a few moments to promote the upcoming course and have a little fun. So yeah, where are you guys coming in from? As always, it's really nice to hear at the outset of a live stream where in the world people are coming from. Let's see. And then after a minute of hearing from people and where you're all coming from, we'll dive into some Q&A. So start cooking up some questions if you have them. Anything about astrology is welcome today. Anything about me that you'd like to know or learn about as a content creator or an astrologer, questions about astrology, questions about the upcoming program, all will be welcome. Faye says, "Oh my gosh, hi! I've never ever been alive before with you." I think I know what you mean. So glad you could be here. Marco is coming in from the Philippines. Welcome. And Jenny's coming in from London, Austin, Texas, Lone Pine, California, Bay Area. Happy Halloween. And is it, how do you pronounce it? Sawane? I think it's Sawane. Anyway, to what do we owe the pleasure of a double feature? I just thought it'd be fun to do some Q&A this afternoon. It's the last day of our early bird sale, so I thought I would come on, promote the course a little bit, promote the last day of the sale, because I have some time before trick-or-treating tonight. And so here I am. Minneapolis, meet Thor. He's our 8-month-old Cane Corso puppy, and we'll see how long he can remain. he can remain balanced and sane. Hi from Miami. I signed up for the course. I'm excited. Welcome. That's awesome. Czech Republic, Bonita, California, Norway, New York, Maine, Sao Paulo, Salwayne. That's what I thought. Okay, good. Okay, great. Oh my God, I have a Cane Corso too. That's fantastic. They're the sweetest ever. What's up with 3i Atlas? I wish I could tell you. I wish I could tell you about that. I can't because I'm not super familiar with it. Let's just see here. I'll talk more about the 3i Atlas thing maybe here in a little bit after we do roll call. From Texas. Yeah. I love hearing that people come from, if you're somewhere international too, drop us a line. I like hearing where people are coming from when they're in other international cities and countries. Well, it's good to be here. I'm going to say a little bit about the year one program, which begins in just a couple of weeks. On November 15th, we start the next section of our year one program. I'm really excited for that. I'm going to take you over to the website, tell you a little bit about the course, what it kind of like what it covers, what it includes, who it's ideal for. And then I will turn my attention to your questions and do a little live Q&A. So first of all, it is the last day of our early bird sale for the year 1 program. Go over to nightlightastrology.com. Click on the courses page, go to first year course. When you scroll down, everything that you need to know about the course curriculum and what we study, what the course covers, what it includes is really covered here. There's also a video that I've been tagging on to the end of daily content that explains in depth what the program includes, so you could watch that. But essentially, this is our first of 4 years of curriculum in ancient astrology, plus a brand new once yearly retreat that we will be hosting for the first time in June of next year. That's about 5 years worth of professional curriculum for people who have a real strong desire to practice professionally in Hellenistic astrology. But many people take our course just because this is your passion, your hobby. It's astrology may be just a part of your lifestyle or your spiritual practice in life. I couldn't recommend taking time in a structured, immersive program within a lineage and community more highly. I've had a number of really important teachers in my life. Of course, I've been a part of many classrooms and studied with many people, but there's been a few that have been really significant. And finding the right voices, the right community, the right way to approach astrology is so personal. But if you connect with my work and you connect with the way I talk about astrology, if you like the focus on the ancient spiritual, philosophical roots of Hellenistic astrology in particular, then you're really going to love this program. I teach 30 courses on the year. They're broken into major units of study. And the purpose of those units of study is to give you the underpinning philosophical rationale behind every major piece of the language of astrology: houses, signs, planets, aspects, dignities, interpretive approaches. That's our year 1 course. If you've never studied Hellenistic astrology, then all of this, regardless of your background, which would be helpful to have, but regardless of your background in astrology, will be brand new for you because the ancient or Hellenistic approach is very unique. If you have a background in Hellenistic astrology, even if you do, you're taking a class within a lineage that has specific ties to specific practitioners, and the way that we take that historical and philosophical information and distill it into practice. And that's something that a lot of people miss out on. They think, well, if I take kind of a historical survey of Hellenistic astrology, or I watch enough podcasts where techniques are covered, I'll know Hellenistic astrology. But in my opinion, it's actually really important to study with someone who has a living, breathing astrological practice, a consulting practice that comes in and through a way of thinking about and doing Hellenistic astrology. And I've had the real blessing of having some strong teachers: Robert Schmidt in the way he thought about and did astrology, Jeffrey Cornelius, the way he thought about and did astrology, and some others too, but those are probably some of the big names that you're familiar with. So over the course of the 30 classes on the year, they're all live, held via live webinars. They're all recorded so you can follow along at your own pace. And then in between all the major units of study, my course director and our TAs will lead breakout study sessions where it's essentially reviewing the major unit of study and having tutoring and open Q&A about the unit we've just covered. There's also a daily interactive group forum discussion where you can ask questions year round, and we have staff there covering your questions as well. Outside of class, we have a bibliography that's like 100 books deep. So as much additional reading, supplemental material, bonus material as you want, you have in this program. It's also not required. So it's kind of go as deep as you want to go. It's designed to be that way. There's a lot of bonus lectures and material. We also have a guest speaker series that you get the replays of, or you can attend live, that speak to different topics in astrology, more like intermediate or advanced topics coming from different practitioners outside of the school, which is a more fun supplemental material. Most people advance to our year 2 program at least 6 months after they've entered the first year program. for all of you who join in November, that would be in June of 2026. The year 2 program builds off from year 1, so you have to take them in order. And the year 2 program develops forecasting and predictive techniques. Year 3 focuses on counseling and advanced delineation skills. We're sort of putting it all together and doing a lot of live practice and a lot of live client work. And talking about what does it mean to be a modern practitioner of ancient astrology in a counseling setting. The year 4 program is horary, where we develop a specific set of predictive tools. And then our new retreat focuses on how to develop that sort of divinatory intuitive component of astrology, which is very important, but not well discussed or taught in the field. So anyway, that's kind of what we offer. That's what you can learn about at Nightlight. That's pretty comprehensive. We also have yearly masterclass series. So every year there's going to be a talk on a set of topics that is outside the scope of our curriculum, but is a part of my practice, but maybe too advanced or would take too long to unpack in the major curriculum. And so every year there's a focus like that. For example, in this past year, we looked at the Purushartas, which are the houses connected by trines in ancient Indian astrology, and how the house topics in ancient Western astrology connect with the philosophical roots of those houses in Indian astrology. That's a very specific kind of advanced intermediate level of topic. And it's those kinds of topics that we generally cover in every year's masterclass. There's obviously monthly webinars you can attend. Those are pretty friendly to anyone and everyone. And then there's also, starting in 2026, we have a new guild membership, which will allow for people to meet under new and full moons for intermediate to advanced level practice. So for people who just want more craft study and practice and community, we're going to have this new group, which is really designed for people who are in our programs or alumni of our programs. So that's kind of the full range of what we offer. Today is the last day to save on the early bird rate. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see the early bird payment options for the program. They're only available through today. Tomorrow morning, this will be turned off. The regular prices will be there. So take advantage of it if you want to join us. The class starts November 15th. And again, everything else you need to know about the program is here. You get to keep all the material for life too. So you can take it at your own pace, move through it however you want, or attend live. There's also need-based tuition assistance. So if you are someone who would really like to take the course but need a little help to make that happen, you can choose within a sliding scale. And that sliding scale is designed to make sure that people who are struggling a little bit financially or in a fixed or limited income have an option that doesn't break the bank. So please take advantage of that. That tuition assistance is available all the way up to the start of the class. The early bird sale is just through today. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to make sure that I said before we get into this special Q&A session. And so my puppy he's restless. He's like, I don't know. I might have to take him out in a minute and just let him wander. He doesn't get to wander too far. He has like a few rooms he can hang out in. Otherwise, mischief occurs. Did you say people open up their practices after year 1? Typically not. Most of the time, people are going to get through year 2 before they do. It's not that you couldn't, but I mean, some people get started with very basic level chart readings after year 1, but mostly to play with a full deck of cards, you need to go through year 2 because that's where you get transiting, forecasting, predictive methods. Ideally, I would not have people start until they've at least commenced year 3, because that's when you get into counseling, and that's also really important. So anyway, but it's very personal. Everyone advances in their own way, at their own time, along their own timeline, according to, the calling inside your heart and how much you study and how long you've been studying and other things like that. So, yeah, we have had anyone who comes through our programs with like a pretty serious desire to practice professionally doesn't have a hard time using our programs to get there. We'll just put it that way. And then the pacing is just like different from person to person. Okay, so take at least year 1 and 2. Thank you. Yeah. Do you have any openings for your community? I'd love to be on your team. Hell, I'd volunteer because it changed my life. Oh, that's so sweet. We don't right now. Typically, when we do, we post it online and let everyone know. And then we tend to give those opportunities to people who are coming through our programs, like in our programs or alumni. In course, there are some fantastic suggestions on how to start doing readings for others. Yeah, we try to provide a lot of feedback for people in terms of how to get the most out of the program and how to get to where you want to go. There's a ton of time for that in our classes and outside of our classes as well. Okay, well, on that note, thank you all for letting me promote the course for a second. I want to get into Q&A so that you guys get some quality time with your questions being answered. I'm going to see if I can put him in his bed, and we'll see if he stays there, because I'm afraid he's going to go over to the door and start whining at it, and my wife's recording her podcast right now, so let me just see. Come here, buddy. Come on. Come on. Come on, bud. Lay down. Good boy. Lay down. Who's a good boy? He did it. It's like, with puppies or like kids or anything, it's so much of it is just like positive reinforcement and repetition, time, patience. He's so sweet though. I love him. Anyway, we'll see how he does. It's sort of like having a baby in the room while you're trying to record. Okay, well, let's go ahead. I'm going to take your questions now. So put them in the chat box. If you have any kinds of questions about astrology, you want to know something about me as a podcaster or an astrologer or whatever, feel free to put it in the chat box. If you put something in earlier in the live stream, I've missed it. So just repost it for me, and we'll see where we can, if I can find it again. I'm moving back home to Minnesota next year. I'm excited to be joining your first year in November. Fantastic. Well, we have some events that we do quarterly here in Minneapolis, so hopefully we'll see you there. Jenny says, could you please talk a little bit about having an ascendant on the 29th degree? I have read that it can feel very fated and like life events are larger than your control, almost fated. Yeah. So my honest opinion about that is that no, it doesn't. There's no, like, having an anaretic degree rising, a 29th degree rising, doesn't really mean anything fundamentally. I guarantee you, if you took 100 people and they all had 29 degree risings, you would get 29 life stories that included peaks and valleys of fortune and misfortune. You would get pain and suffering in different measures. You'd get tragedy, and you'd get more like just an average non-eventful life. Like there'd be an even distribution of things. We have to get away from thinking about astrology in terms of like this. If you have this placement, it means this. Let me just put it this way. How often do you think that if someone draws the death card in tarot, that it literally means death? Probably not very often. Like, I would say, if I've drawn in my lifetime, I've drawn the death card in tarot at least a couple hundred times. And very rarely does the death card in the times that I've pulled the death card, very rarely has it ever meant literal death. So context is everything. The death card in tarot will reflect a different meaning based on every different context that it comes up in. And what we have to get away from thinking of is we got to stop thinking that the birth chart is a blueprint, and that everything in the birth chart has some kind of concrete empirical blueprint-like meaning. What does it mean that I have a 29th degree rising? doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything in some kind of fixed absolute way. Not in your chart and not in charts in general. There is a way of thinking about anaretic degrees that we could bring into the context of an examination of a birth chart, but the context of why we're approaching the chart will dictate why we would or wouldn't include the anaretic degree and what particular angle or take on the anaretic degree we might employ. So one of the most problematic issues in modern astrology is that we're thinking about it like it's a science. We're thinking about it like it's a set of empirical data that has some objective meaning. It has oracular meaning, which means that 29th degree in your chart on at least 40 or 50% of the days of your life probably means absolutely nothing. Think about it like that. Like on your average Tuesday, where life doesn't look a whole lot different from one person to the next, and you included, that anaretic degree literally means nothing. And the birth chart, in some ways, on some days, like there's many, many days in a row where like my birth chart's not in my head, it's not with me, and yet modern astrology teaches us to think that it is something that has this like objective reality. The deck of cards, the tarot in my bag, it has no divinatory value or meaning or significance until I draw a card. And then that card and its multivalent archetypal nature can have a meaning that has something closer to an objective truth to it based on why I've drawn it out of this bag at this time. That's how astrology was originally thought of as well. Your birth chart is not you. It's like an oracular device. It's like a bag of cards. So let's just say, for example, that on some Tuesday, you have an extraordinarily epic life event. And it so happens that Pluto's transiting across that 29th degree of your ascendant. Well, now we have something to talk about. But it first of all, no matter what we're talking about in astrology, what does everyone say about it? Oh, if you have Pluto in this house, or if you have this degree rising, or if you have this feature of your birth chart, I have read that it can feel very fated. Everyone says that. But for ancient people, there's nothing, not the movement of a single blade of grass that is more or less fated than anything else. Fate's a word that really, most of the time, has been about describing our emotional and subjective relationship to the way that things unfold. And one of the ways that we talk about life and its unfolding is that it feels to us as though it could not have been anything other than this. So we call it fate. But it's more like saying, it's like the kids at school. That was fire, man. Well, that was fated, man. We don't think about it like that, but the existence of fate as a word in the human language is much more poetic and evocative and emotional than it is metaphysical. And I say that only because most ancient astrologers in both the East and the West believed that fate and free will they were identical to each other. They only appear in our linear minds like they're opposite, but they're two sides of the same coin. Fate's just one of the ways that we have of talking about what we perceive to have come from choices and actions and events in the world. And we talk about them in the language of fate. And other times we talk about the exact same stuff in the language of choice. So start with the idea. It's really helpful to start with the idea that there's nothing in astrology, absolutely nothing, that is more or less fated than anything else. There's nothing in life that's more or less fated than anything else. There's nothing in the cosmos that's more or less fated than anything else. It's better to think about reality in the ancient mystical sense like this undulating, moving mandala. Like Here. See if I can, let me see if I can do something fun. All right. I want you to think about reality itself as something visually speaking, just as a visual metaphor. Reality is like this. It's nonlinear, it's acausal, it's timeless, it's eternal, it has no beginning, and it has no end. One way of saying what it is to be in this as beings that are a part of this, and this feeling we get that it can't be anything other than this, is the word fate. So when we ask, could it be, I've read that it feels very fated, and like life events are larger than your control, almost fated. Nothing can be more or less fated. It's just this. One way we have of describing thisness is fate. But another way we have of describing thisness is free and open. But they're the same thing. They're just different relative orientations within the same thing. Okay. Really good question. I hope that that explanation helps. What I would say is that having a 29th degree rising is an interesting symbol, but it will mean so many different things throughout the course of a life. Think about it more like a talisman that you can approach and see your life through. Think about it more like a meditative image that you can come back to, but you don't always have to come back to it like it's always the same or has some concrete objective existence or meaning. All right. Book recommendations on zodiacal releasing. I would not, there's no book that I would recommend on zodiacal releasing. I don't think there's any that there might be one that I haven't read, but I haven't read a book or a text on zodiacal releasing that I like personally. I don't even know if there are many books written on zodiacal releasing, come to think of it. What I would recommend instead is hop over to the Project Hindsight website, the memorial tribute to Robert Schmidt and his work. He has passed, but someone is curating his collection of lectures. And he has a great lecture series on zodiacal releasing when he originally interpreted the text that the text that contained the technique from Vettius Valens. So if you want, like straight from the first person who ever really sort of decoded zodiacal releasing and translated the text in which the technique appeared, I'd highly recommend checking out I think the lectures on Project Hindsight's website on zodiacal releasing are there and available. I could be wrong, but that's what I would recommend, because to me, that's the best thing that's ever been said about the technique. There's also some things that I had a chance to speak with Robert Schmidt about that he never wrote about or talked about before he died, that I teach in one of the master classes. If you go to the shop page at Nightlight and go to the master class that I did called Zen and the Art of Zodiacal Releasing, that series contains many of the ideas that I've used since some of my last discussions with Robert Schmidt about zodiacal releasing, which he died before he was ever able to do anything with, but they do reflect a lot of the last conversations I had with him about that topic, one of which basically includes the idea that we should start thinking about zodiacal releasing a little bit more like the Hindu dasha system, which is something that Schmidt was talking with me about before he passed. And so in that masterclass series on the website, you'll find it if you purchase it and listen to it. It's about 10 hours worth of content on zodiacal releasing. And we talk a lot in that series about the Hindu dasha way of thinking about time lords in zodiacal releasing. And that is my favorite thing that's ever been done on zodiacal releasing, not to toot my own horn, because it didn't come from me. It came from Schmidt. Okay. Well, thank you for the super chat. What would be the harshest transit November and December? Ooh, I think the Mars-Uranus transit coming up is pretty intense. Let's take a look at that really quick. Good question. To me, I have this one highlighted. Let's just take a look. This is coming up really shortly. So this is Tuesday, November 4th, which is like just a few days from now. Mars in Sagittarius will oppose Uranus in Gemini. That's a pretty intense transit. Mars-Uranus transits are always like that. So, yeah, the other one would be another intense transit comes next Friday, November 7th. Venus in Scorpio will square Pluto in Aquarius. That's pretty epic. Go forward a little bit more. Mercury's going to station and turn retrograde in a conjunction with Mars. That could really sort of wreak some havoc. So Mercury, Mars, that's November, right around November 12th through the 13th. When Mercury stations retrograde, it's always a big deal. But then when it does so in a conjunction with Mars, ooh, you know. So if you're looking for like a little bit more stressful transits, that I'd put that right up there. I like the grand water trine, actually. I think I probably have maybe a glass half full take on the grand water trine in general, but it's pretty watery, middle of November. There's a Mercury-Uranus opposition during the midst of a new moon right around November 19th and 20th. That new moon features Mercury Cazimi, new moon, Mercury Cazimi, all opposite Uranus. That's a very powerful new moon in November as well. Let's see what else. Those really are some of the big ones. And then I really like the Mercury Venus conjunction in Scorpio around November 24th. I feel like that's, I don't know, something about that feels like it could be pretty meaningful, deep, thoughtful, communicative, sensual, beautiful, creative. I like that, especially since Mercury's turning directions. Let's see. I think another one would be like, if you go forward just a little bit, Mars squaring Saturn around December 8th. Anytime Mars squares Saturn, it just feels a little, it can feel like harsh, you know, so Mars square Neptune, okay, same thing. Sun square Saturn, same thing. That's all around the middle of December. Those would be some of the harder transits, but Mars opposite Uranus, I'd put right at the top of the list, and that's coming up the beginning of next week. So yeah, good question. And thank you again for the super chat. Really appreciate you there. Okay. I remember you mentioning life being like a spiral staircase. That's not a question, but seemed to apply. Yeah, I mean, if you really want to blow your mind, sit and meditate on this. And I'm seriously mean like sit with it for a while, like, you know, even a couple of days of meditating with it. Which is the fact that ancient astrologers thought that time was circular, non-linear. Time and history are circular, cyclical. Retrocausality is something that I've been talking about for a long time as an astrologer. And I took some of my cues on that from Jeffrey Cornelius, who wrote a lot about astrology as divinatory. So anyway, yeah, I mean, if you what is growth? What is spiritual growth if it is not taking place in like a time-bound linear fashion? Like, we think of spiritual growth as like progressing along a linear plot line, like as I grow older, I get wiser or something like that. Or as I progress one lifetime to the next, that I get wiser. But there are different conceptualizations of time that render some of that way of thinking really sort of pointless. And I'm just really interested in those kinds of things. Anyway, a spiral staircase gets the idea of something that is in movement, where there's like echoes within circles and cycles of time. So Ken Wilber was the first one I ever heard use the spiral staircase image for growth. And, you know, I think it's a nice image. Okay, let's see here. Ophiuchus is like a spiral staircase, such what ties the rounds into a processive spiral. Or what would you think? No. Get me fired up about a 13th sign. So the 13th sign thing is, it's really important to understand that the number 13 already has a really special and important role in ancient astrology. First of all, thinking that there needs to be a 13th sign and that sign is tied to a constellation is not astrological in its thinking. It's the same exact problem we get into with the zodiac has changed argument. The zodiac has changed argument is, the premise of that argument is that the zodiac is based on constellations. It's not based on constellations. Constellations are based on the zodiac. The zodiac is the solar year as defined by the equinoxes and solstices. That's the same in sidereal and tropical astrology. Most people don't even know that. Like, you wouldn't believe the number of comments that I get throughout the year with people who don't understand that. It's just such a common misconception, which is why the same old story runs over and over again. What's the exact same problematic, completely fallacious premise that the 13th sign argument begins with, which is that there's this hidden 13th sign of the zodiac, and it has to do with a constellation. The zodiac is not a collection of constellations. It has nothing to do with constellations. Constellations have to do with the zodiac. The constellations that were used to map out the tropical zodiac, right? Those constellations pre-existed and predated astrology. They were only used as like local, well-known celestial references to a mathematical circle that was being defined along brand new Pythagorean ways of thinking. It's like Platonic, Pythagorean, Hermetic, eventually other schools too. But the point is that the zodiac as we know it, horoscopic astrology, is rooted in a zodiac its nature is the solar year, and its anchors are the equinoxes and solstices. And pre-existing constellations were just loosely assigned to the mathematical portions of that circle. So if you start by saying, oh, there's this 13th sign and it has to do with a constellation that wasn't considered, all you're doing is saying that you don't understand how the zodiac was constructed in the first place. There is no 13th sign. There never was a 13th sign. There never will be a 13th sign as long as you're doing tropical astrology. That doesn't mean you couldn't create some other divinatory system with a different kind of zodiac that isn't tropical and isn't rooted in the equinoxes and solstices and isn't rooted in the sacred numerology of the 1 and the 2 or the 12. Of course, you could construct some other system. I'm not against that. I think all of these systems are relative, and they're highly creative. There's probably millions of them that we don't even know about throughout our solar system. Or, you know, I really feel like as many dialects as exist in planet Earth among humans, there are divinatory dialects. I'm not opposed to that at all. What I'm opposed to is people trying to shoehorn something that has nothing to do with the basic logic of a system into a system. It's like, it'd be like telling an acupuncturist, even though you use needles in your system, you could use a hammer. Well, you could use a hammer, but then you wouldn't be doing acupuncture because the premise has to do with needles. So if you want, you can make astrology about constellations, but then it's no longer tropical astrology because by definition, tropical astrology is something else. So it's like, it's just, it's like, it gets so frustrating because you're having to explain the basic logic of the zodiac to people who haven't ever taken the time to understand it in the first place. And then they're telling you they think they know what it is. It's so ridiculous. So the presence of the number 13 in astrology is actually very sacred, and it plays a basic fundamental role in the entire thing. You ask yourself, well, why did they choose the ideal number of 12 for the number of the zodiac, even though there are 12 lunar cycles and change? Well, first of all, they're not a lunar calendar. It's not a lunar calendar system. It's a solar calendar system. And you can quibble with that and say, well, I don't like that. Fine, then create another zodiac. But a solar zodiac is a solar zodiac, right? That doesn't mean there couldn't be another one. It just means if you're operating within a logic that starts with the solar year as the basic organizing principle of the entire language, all you have to do is just say, well, I reject that premise and I'm going to start with another one. That's what you need to go do. But otherwise, what you need to understand is that a lunar cycle is defined by the synodic conjunctions and return of conjunctions between the sun and the moon. So the idealized zodiac is a 12-sign zodiac because it ideally matches the 360 degrees of a circle with 12 lunar divisions of that circle that correspond with 12 perfect lunation synodic cycles in a solar year. Now, one could easily say, but there's 12 and change. There's 12 lunar cycles perfectly, and then there's change. And similarly with the solar year, it's not a perfect 360 days. It's 360 days and change. But the explanation that ancient astrologers gave for that deviation is precisely where the number 13 plays a role in the construction of the entire language. See, what they believed was that deviation from an ideal, whether it's the 5 extra days of change or the leftover or imperfect remainder between 12 lunation cycles and the change that's left over in the start of a 13th one, in either case, the deviation from an ideal is what it means to be embodied in the material world. We're not living in the world of perfect triangles where everything is perfectly synchronized. We live in a world that has that approximates an ideal. It gets close to it, but it also has to deviate so that it can be other. It's if it was a carbon copy, if this world perfectly matched, if we had an exact 360-day year, perfect 12 lunation cycles in a year, then this world would be no different than an abstract triangle. But that ancient astrologers said that philosophically speaking, that remainder, whether you call it the 13th lunar cycle or again the imperfect remainder of days in a solar year, that imperfect sort of deviation, that asynchronization, expresses something fundamental about life in the cosmos itself. It's a reflection of an eternal ideal. But in order to be separate from it, it also has to deviate. It has to slightly curve away from perfect synchronization, because perfect synchronization would not be life. So if you want to fight about the number 13 and why it's left out, start by understanding where its place actually was in the entire paradigm, which most people who come up with this argument haven't taken the time to understand. So yeah, so that's why Ophiuchus isn't a thing. It's not that it's not a constellation. It's not that you couldn't have a lunar-centric form of astrology or an entirely different paradigm, an entirely different language with a different logic. I'm open to all of that. I'm just not open to people making up bullshit stories about a missing 13th sign that has no place in the system because they haven't taken the time to understand the basic philosophical premise of the entire system, where it actually plays a very meaningful role, the number 13. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. Okay. So the other thing, by the way, people will commonly say, oh, well, Vedic or Indian astrologers follow the constellations. Don't they? Aren't they rooted in the constellations? And the answer to that is also no. That's another very common misconception. The Vedic zodiac is a tropical zodiac. It's not. In no way do Vedic astrologers track planets through constellations. They track it through a tropical zodiac whose mathematical perfect circle is oriented by the equinoxes and solstices. It's just that they adjust the 12 portions of the zodiac relative to the original boundary markers of those 12 positions drifting. So all that Vedic astrology is a slightly reoriented tropical solar zodiac. They're not measuring planets by their locations and constellations. They're just slightly reorienting that perfect circle relative to the gradual drifting of the constellations. But that's not the same as saying that their zodiac is based on constellations. Indian astrologers will tell you this. Take some time to learn from them. And if you tell them, isn't your zodiac based on the constellations? This is what they'll tell you. No, not only that, but there are multiple systems that exist within Vedic astrology that differ in how they orient the solar zodiac to the drifting of the equinoxes and solstices. So it's not even like there's just one perfect way of compensating for the drift of stars relative to the equinoxes and solstices. There are many in Indian astrology. Okay. Here we go to, I really love the multidimensional way the Hindus looked at the stars in astrology. What's your perspective on evolutionary astrology, which I think adds dimension back into Western astrology? So the problem, first of all, I love ancient Indian astrology. Ancient Indian astrology and ancient Hellenistic astrology lack nothing, in my opinion, psychologically, philosophically, spiritually, from a technique or theory perspective. I don't think they lack anything. I think they're wonderful systems. They require sensitive practitioners who care about the soul of the person that they're working with, right? But there's nothing lacking. There's nothing that I think needs to be like added. Oh, who is it? Hold on just a second. There's someone outside. Let me. It's okay. It's an Amazon delivery man. The worst people in the whole world. That's how our dogs feel for sure. Anyway, when you say that you think that evolutionary astrology adds dimension back into Western astrology, there's a few problems here. One is that it sounds like what you're doing is equating Hindu astrology with evolutionary astrology, and they're very different. Like, they're not the same thing at all. In fact, modern evolutionary astrologers have many ideas and theories about karma and techniques involving the nodes of the moon that are not following the teachings of Vedic astrology at all. They're completely made up from the standpoint of what traditional Vedic astrology tells us about Rahu and Ketu, or about karma, or about how enlightenment works through lifetimes. So much of modern evolutionary astrology is actually derived from modern theosophy and various New Age movements that then co-opt certain very limited understandings of karma and very new ideas about things like the nodes of the moon. None of which, by the way, I think is like out of bounds or evil or bad, or, it's just, but it's very important because modern evolutionary astrology is not Indian astrology, really at all. So there's that. But then secondarily, when you say that you think that evolutionary astrology adds dimension back into Western astrology, I'd be curious to hear you say more about that, because that's interesting to me. But what I would say is that once you study the philosophical and technical roots of ancient Eastern and Western astrology, I think what you find is that outside of being a sensitive, caring individual with the lives of the clients that you work with, and maybe some of the modern psychological advancements, like one of modern astrology's real contributions in my mind is the marriage of depth psychology and archetypal psychology to astrology. That's a great blessing that we have a great tool in our kit that modern astrology has given us. But I think I don't think there's anything lacking in ancient astrology, or like East or West. But anyway, I think you said earlier that you're signed up for our class, so you'll get a chance to look at all of this, the history, the philosophy, and hopefully, come to your own conclusions about all of it. We want you to do that. It'll get me all fired up talking about 13th signs and the zodiac has changed. Okay. Okay, let's see here. Your explanation for the argument of the 13th zodiac should be a separate posted video. Well, in fact, it is. You can go. I posted it last Sunday. You can go look at it. It's right there it was posted on a Sunday. So you can go back and check it out. It was last Sunday that it was posted. So excited about your new book. Any release date? Yeah. We are hoping to have my new book finished and able to be ordered and held in your hands or bought as an ebook sometime before March of 2026. So just a couple more months. We're moving into copy editing, proofreading, cover design right now. I'm really excited about it. It was 2 years in the making, just finished it. Really excited with where it's at. I'm also republishing my first book, Fishers of Men, in second edition form with kind of a new author's note, 15 years later. I'm really excited to have that out too. So yeah, I'll be super stoked to tell you guys about that. I'd love to hear more about the zodiac and the number 13. Well, yeah. So think about it just really simply. You can't divide 13 by 2, right? Like evenly. And so the number 12 you can. And this is one little part of it, but the marriage of the 1 and the 2 numerologically is fundamental to the I Ching, to many forms of divination, many modes of philosophy. The Pythagoreans, it was a big deal. It was the number 1 and 2 and the yoking of them, and the 12 was thought to be the number of creation and the cosmos itself. And so the 12-fold division of the solar year is looked at as a celestial pattern that tells us something about reality. So the philosophy of the system starts with the idea that reality is a circle, one thing that contains everything. But then that circle is broken into parts. And so you have oneness and manyness. And the oneness is described by the total circle of the zodiac. That is the annual path of the sun, ideally a 360-degree circle, ideally. And then the 12 lunations within the solar year, the moon being a reflective light of the sun's light, represent the manyness, so that reality is one thing and many things at the exact same time. And so this feature of the sun and the moon's patterns and relationship to one another on an ideal level, perfectly synchronized, gives us a 12-sign zodiac. However, the fact that there are 12 cycles and change, that there's 360 degrees and change, was not lost on astrologers. But the way they explained the fact that this world shows us, it gets really, really close to an ideal synchronization, but then it becomes asynchronous, or it deviates slightly from that ideal. This world is thought to therefore embody 13ness, insofar as 13ness is not able to be perfectly divided in half. Perfectly divided by 2 would be a feature of something ideal in Pythagorean philosophy. So the fact that it's like the universe as a manifest thing reflects an ideal, but it's sort of an odd duck that can't be perfectly synchronized, is necessary for it to be alive rather than just like an abstract circle. So the number 13 was Earth is the number 13. The cosmos is the number 13. Life is the number 13 in a philosophical sense. 365 days, not 360, is life. 12 cycles and change is life. And yet, if you try to make life completely free from an ideal that it corresponds to, you're killing the ideal. This system says no, both exist. And so the property of the zodiac, which this world reflects, is ideal in its construction. This world, in its mirroring of it, is sort of odd. So that's how life and the zodiac are like two things working together. Odd and even, ideal and sort of close but not ideal. Those are opposites that were a part of the foundational philosophy of the entire language. And again, that's why you can't just say, oh, well, 13 is missing, so we need another sign. No, that would be to idealize the number 13, which is basically an attempt at objectification. It's understandable that people would want 13 to have a sacred place, but trying to idealize something that resists idealization is not the way to go. It's sort of like saying, look, if you really want to be a punk rocker, don't go to school wearing a shirt that says I'm a punk. You're missing the point. Just be one. So for 13 to be honored, just let it be. Let the universe be deviant from an ideal, and 13 thus has a place. If you try to bake it into the zodiac, now you're trying to idealize 13. It's like wearing a shirt to school that says, please look at me, I'm a punk. Well, now you're not a punk, specifically because you tried to be one in some ideal categorical way. Okay. Adam, do you ever think about an artist's color wheel when reviewing a chart? PSA, Cane Corso used to take me for walks. Yeah. I don't think so much in colors. I think in images. I suppose the images that come up, I could pay more attention to their colors, I suppose. That's really interesting. But yeah, I love that. That's exactly what we're getting into in our programs, our yearly retreat, the Oracle Within, where we're really trying to help people develop their intuitive capacity as a reader, because a lot of the best ways we read charts will involve the unique way that we have a relationship with symbols. Sometimes that's movies, sometimes that's colors, sometimes that's art, and being encouraged to find the medium through which this language can speak, that you can convey it creatively, is so important. If all we do is walk around talking about Venus energy or Mars energy, no, I mean, take Venus and Scorpio and try to explain it to someone who knows nothing about, Scorpio or astrology, or who, will throw up in their mouth if you talk about energy. Now, I want you, with that person, to tell them about Venus and Scorpio. You can't use the word energy. You can't use the words Venus and Scorpio. How would you tell them about this archetype? And when you find the easy way you could do that, that's a clue as to what your unique vernacular is as a reader. Is at least one clue. That's the kind of thing we don't talk enough about this, but we have to build this, because if we're all just going to walk around sharing the same boring cliched language set, we're not becoming diviners. We're just resembling each other. It's the same thing happened in the yoga industry. We just pump out a million people who look the same and talk the same and act the same and wear the same Lululemon pants. And no, I'm not trying to be a dick or anything, but it's like each of us has such a unique way of thinking about symbolism, because the way we think about symbolism is born of the way we've lived in relation to them. That gives each of us a really unique palette to speak from if we take the time to figure out what it is. Logos, the crack in everything. Exactly. There's a crack in everything. That is 13. Do you see what I mean? Do you see how they say we're so deeply honoring of 13? The earth is 13. The universe is 13. It's the crack that the light escapes through It's the void that doesn't perfectly align. The manifest universe, your body, impermanence, life, decay, entropy, 13, sacred. But if you try to idealize it, it's like raping 13. Okay. So, if you have questions, we're just arriving. We've been just doing kind of an impromptu Q&A session this afternoon as a way of promoting the final day of the early bird rate for our year one program. I'm happy to take any questions you have. If you have questions for me personally about, who I am as a creator or person, if you have questions about astrology or the courses, or absolutely anything, I'm happy to take some time answering your questions. So go ahead and put your question into the comment box. Your video thumbnail is so weak. I don't even know. I'm trying to find where the video thumbnail is. I didn't upload one, so I think it's just a default one for the day. But I'll take your word for it. Okay. Let's see. What questions do you guys have? I was wondering what you think about the patterns in natal charts, like yods, crosses, and cradles. How do they show up in people's lives? They're like these like modern aspect patterns, yods, crosses, cradles, etc. Let's just start with something very basic. Astrology, like all forms of divination, is a language of patterns, symbols, patterns, symbolic, and pattern recognition. So it always comes across kind of like jerky when I say this. I don't mean it to be jerky. I don't think that there is anything literal or objective about yods or crosses or cradles. I think that it's like occasionally the planets appear in a pattern that we now call a yod, a cross, or a cradle. But you know what I hear people saying about them? Mostly, if I look and I just survey, like, what do modern popular astrologers say about yods, crosses, and cradles? It sounds like the same thing they say about everything else. Oh, look, it's this profound evolutionary opportunity. Oh, look, it's extra fated. Oh, look, it's extra destined. Oh, look, you're extra special. It's always the same. It's the same usual suspects, the same general delineations that are provided for all. Oh, it's an intense period of activation. Oh, it's a period that suggests that you're at a crossroads in your evolutionary development across lifetimes or whatever. So the reason that I don't like things like this so much is because in my experience, talking to thousands and thousands of astrologers over the years, students in training, clients, people who know astrology, I'm always so much more impressed personally. And I can only speak for myself and what, flips my hair back as an astrologer. But like, I would much prefer to hear someone say something to me that I've never thought about with something as simple as Venus and Scorpio, that just a bunch of, generic stuff about a yod. And most of the time I find that in a client reading where someone's there to talk with me for an hour, if they're having a significant transit to that natal Venus in Scorpio or that Venus in Sagittarius or that Mars in Cancer or whatever the case might be, listening and being able to say or see something new and original about something very simple like Mars in Cancer or like Venus in a certain house that I haven't said before, that I haven't thought of before, that comes to me because of the art of symbolic listening. That I just prefer that. I would rather that than hear something generic about a yod again. Something that doesn't hit, that doesn't feel substantive, that doesn't feel any different than any of the other generic things that are being said about a new asteroid that's super evolutionarily charged or like whatever else. I'm as a practitioner, I'm interested in saying deeper things about fewer or simpler or more basic things because I find it more interesting to get to know. I prefer intimacy and depth rather than quantity. I'd rather have fewer symbols. This is why in year one, we pull all of the, just for 1 year of your life, take out the outer planets and get to know the traditional 7. You'd be surprised at how much more is there with just the traditional 7 planets than you think there is because of how modern astrology has taught you to overload the significance of the outer planets. And often overload them with nothing but cliches, by the way. And then when you add them back in year 2, now I can really get to know them. And I can really understand the difference between Saturn and Pluto or whatever else, right? So for me, it's generally like that. And that's not to say that you couldn't say something really interesting or profound or unique about a yacht or a cross or a cradle. I just don't tend to see those kinds of things being said about them. I would much rather attend a talk by Liz Green talking about a Saturn-Mars opposition for 2 hours, which she can do like a rock star, than I would hear the next person talk about the evolutionary potential of a cradle or a kite or something like that. Get off my damn lawn. That's how I am. Are you doing a family costume? We're doing Beetlejuice this year. Witches, and I'm going as a warlock. Don't have to question you at all. You're genuinely a great person. Oh, thank you. That's nice. Do 2026 and 27 look like it has a little less of the heavier square and opposition transits overall? Well, I'd say that like one thing that we probably, I mean, if you're someone who pays attention to a lot of transits and you track them meaningfully, you know, you're not just in a spin cycle of life and blaming the planets on everything, because we can do that when as astrologers. We can just be like, we can project what feels like chaos onto the cosmos when it's our own chaos. And there's nothing more or less, you know, lifelike about life this year or next year. It's all the cycles of opposites, the impermanence, the pain, the suffering, the joy, the bliss, the mundane, the ordinariness. Like it's all sort of, you know, it's good to keep in perspective that old saying, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. Because astrology in a way is just helping us track the ebbs and flows of experience that really for most of us are very similar. There's life, there's pain, there's loss, there's joy, there's plans, there's failure of plans, there's effort, there's loss, you know? So first I would say start with, can life just look like life? And can we not think that life is going to look like the astrology? Or put differently, don't forget that the astrology just looks like life. And that that's always going to kind of be the same. I mean, time, place, and circumstance makes AI a part of what life looks like right now. And maybe it didn't 10 years ago or something. But it's also important to just get out of historical sensationalism with astrology. So like that to me would come first. But if you are someone who tracks the astrology month by month, year by year, then one benefit is that, you know, 26, 27, we get the outer planets all kind of comfortably into their new signs and start settling into the shifts of those symbols in our psyches. And I do think that can make a difference in terms of, you know, just it's a big psychic transition around this year, 2025. Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, Uranus, Jupiter, all making big changes. So yeah, I think just like conventionally as astrology goes, the next 2 years look less transitional and epic with the outer planets, and that probably will make a difference. Did you meet your wife under a certain transit? Yeah, I met her during my Saturn return. She appears in the epilogue of my book. In my first months as an astrologer, in fact, I met her. I did a reading for her because she was referred by another client, and then I did a reading for her, and then she said she was an herbalist, and of course I was working with ayahuasca, and we both had a background in entheogens and things like that. So I ended up getting sick, really sick, under some eclipses, and she sent me herbal medicine in the mail, and I think she put a spell on me. I think she bewitched me with her herbs. Anyway, yeah. I love seeing you interact with your daughter. How would you describe your relationship with them? You know what? I'm going to let little man out. Give me just a second. Come on, bud. Okay, sweetheart, I can't deal with him anymore. Do you want his thing? Is the come on? You want it? Okay. How would you describe your relationship with your daughters? Being a parent's hard because I have patience for myself and my work and commitment and discipline for my self-care, my spiritual practices. Like I figured that stuff out kinda, but being present, just present for these little people and being a healthy, like masculine father figure requires more patience and devotion and care and sensitivity than I feel like I have most of the time. That's just me being honest. I'm not a bad dad by any stretch, but I frequently just feel like I have to like regularly say to God, and I was telling my wife this last night actually. I have to regularly say to God, I'm not capable of this. I don't have the tools. I'm not good enough. Like, that's how I feel. And so will you please help me? Will you please work with me, even though I feel very limited, and I have to constantly deal with feeling like a failure without showing them that I feel that way, right? Because I want to be confident and like I don't want to show them that I feel inadequate, but I feel that way often. And then I find time and time again that they love me and they are getting so much more out of me than I think they are. Then that, like I'm feeling like, man, I'm just not very good at this. And they see me like I can do no wrong. And then I always end up feeling like that's how God responds to me when I don't feel good enough. That God tells me he loves me through my girls when they tell me that I'm good enough the way that I am, that I'm good enough dad for them. That's how it is for me. And it kind of goes, it ebbs and flows and cycles. Sometimes I feel like I'm really solid. I'm doing well, but thanks for asking. It's fun to reflect on that. In 2023, you predicted aliens in 25. I did. I don't keep receipts, but I have. It was fun to be right about that. I mean, it's just like I don't think it's even that crazy. You go back to 2020, I talked about it even when I talked about Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius. That was actually when it first started. So yeah, look, I'm like, I remember when I first drank ayahuasca. For now whatever 100 plus ceremonies, it feels strange to say this to people maybe who haven't had psychedelic experiences, but anyone who has had like really meaningful, deep, spiritually, poignant, altered states, you talk to other beings. There's no other way of looking at it. It's not just a fiction. It's not something like once you have an experience, whether it's in a dream or maybe an altered state of some kind, and you literally have contact with a dead ancestor, an interdimensional being of some kind. In my case, I was in Peru in the Amazon watching a shaman from an indigenous lineage living deep in the jungle communicating with the spirits of plants in altered visionary states where everyone in the mesa could see the exact same thing happening, although we're all supposedly having our own completely private psychedelic experiences. But no, we all were seeing the same visions. And he's communicating with the plants, with the spirits of trees. And then there are literal flying saucers and extra dimensional beings walking around the mesa, talking to me, guiding me through elaborate visionary passages that end with me barfing some kind of trauma from the 3rd grade out into a bucket. Yeah, I mean, how do I feel about Three Eye Atlas? I don't. Because I have no idea what's going on. It's like Terence McKenna, reality is stranger than we can possibly imagine. If there's a spaceship that's about to show up with a bunch of, necromancers that are going to pull our ancestors out of the dead with some kind of advanced shamanic technology, or if there's a bunch of surfers coming here from another galaxy with a really advanced strain of THC, I wouldn't be surprised by anything, because I've already had my mind sufficiently blown that like, I don't care. I don't anticipate. I'm not attached. I don't expect. Whatever Three Eye Atlas is, I don't give a shit. That's just being totally honest. Not because I'm not interested in the fate of the human race, or not that I'm not totally fascinated by the existence of aliens, but because whatever it is, it will be. I have no control over it, and I'm just not going to be surprised by absolutely anything. I'm going to have to die someday. We're all going to have to die someday. I have no doubt aliens are real. I have no doubt there's more dimensions and beings in reality than we can possibly fathom. So what am I going to do wasting my time trying to figure out what this comet is or isn't? It's fascinating. I have nothing against people who are fascinated by it. I think it's fascinating too. But I mean, the only answer I really have is like, we'll find out. I would not be surprised, given Pluto and Aquarius, if sometime in the next 20 years, we really do have meaningful interaction or contact with other civilizations, interdimensional beings. And I can say that without any attachment to it, because I've already had contact with those kinds of things in altered states. And it's just, wow. I mean, one of the things that gets me excited is I'm like, well, what, like, how profound would it be if there were hundreds of thousands of people through contact with some other civilization, ideally some civilization that's benevolent and intelligent, not just like cruel or domineering or something. But how fantastic would it be if literally maybe even millions of people across the planet, because of the revelation of some other kind of species, instantly had their imagination expanded as rapidly and amazingly as I did when I drank ayahuasca? That excites me. That's pretty cool to think about. Like, wow, that would be neat. But also, there's something so messianic and apocalyptic about everyone getting so jazzed up about comets or visitors and all of this stuff that I just want to, it makes me feel like I want to go back to a ceremony and barf. Oh, you can feel like Mercury's like still like loosely opposing Uranus. Like today is like, so I feel so, what's the word? Like, I feel like a little rebellious in my responses. Arcturus says, do you ever think about the indigenous 13 moons? Well, that's the thing, is that I love that there's so many different ways of tracking celestial patterns that can convey it. To me, it's almost like the patterns that we see in the skies that we work with, calendars, divinatory systems, they all have different kinds of spirits that work through and in them, like different intelligences. And I just think it's really fascinating to immerse yourself in those and get to know them, which is why you always hear me talking about like developing a relationship with the planets. Like, this system of astrology is much more powerful when you get to know the spirits that live in it and have a relationship with them than it is if you take it as some kind of information system. No one probably thinks what you say comes across as jerky until you mention that it might. I don't know, because whenever I say things that I feel really strongly and passionately about and like really creatively, I just sort of let loose. It always feels like I'm leaving like a very sweet Cancerian part of myself and sort of stepping into like my Capricorn part. I always feel a little guilty about it, but also kind of like I need to let loose. Oh, so it's like there's like Cancerians have like guilt. Oh my gosh. Cassandra says, I highly recommend Nightlight Curriculum, life-changing. Well, Cassandra's one of our readers. Go get a reading from her in the Affordable Reading Clinic on the website. She's an amazing reader and a friend of me and Ashley too. Do you have any tips for getting better with synthesizing, like two planets aspecting each other in those houses? Do you have any tips for extracting the meaning? Well, first of all, start with context. Like, let's say that you have two planets in a sextile. Don't try to extract their meaning, right? Think about that language even. And I'm not trying to pick on you because I get what you mean, just like basically. Extract meaning. It's like, I'm going to extract the testicles of this walrus to see how it mates, or it's like it's so like empirical. Instead, what I would encourage you to do is start with the context. For example, depending on what the planets are, let's say it's Venus and Saturn or something, and they're in a sextile to one another, or trine or square, whatever it is, and they're in two houses. Think about one of the topics of the houses, or think about one of the topics that the planets naturally represent. Venus, love, or if Saturn's in the 11th house, groups and friends, or something like that. And then think about the relationship between those planets given the context of the topics. That's always a better starting point than trying to synthesize or extract meaning. Start with the context. The context will lead you to creative ways of seeing the connection. And that's how you actually do astrology. That's how all divination works. Come up, like, for example, someone was asking me this the other day and I was giving them a practice tip. They said, I don't know what to make of my Venus in the 12th house. What does it mean? I said, well, let's start with a topic. Give me a topic that might make sense to be thinking about for Venus in the 12th house. She said, well, love. And she said, I have Venus and Virgo in the 12th and I don't know how to read it. And I said, well, give me a topic. Oh, love. Okay. What kind of lover would be described by Venus and Virgo in the 12th house? Oh, okay. Well, maybe a really shy, nervous lover who has insecurities. Okay, great. That's a delineation. And you were able to make a delineation instantly with context. You got stalled out when you started by saying, what does Venus in the 12th mean? Because when you start with what does Venus in the 12th mean, it's as broad as being like, what does the 10 of cups mean? Well, you can say some things, about 10 of cups, but how much more can you say when you ask the question, will my wife's delivery at the hospital next week with our second child go well? And you draw the 10 of cups. That's the context. It makes it so much easier to read. So you start with context and then work with the synthesis, see if that helps. Hey, thank you, Sarah, saying that she really likes the courses and that they've changed her life. Yeah, if you can put up with me, but thankfully not just me, our whole crew. We have really an awesome staff. And if you enjoy hanging out and thinking about astrology, learning about it, thinking about it in brand new ways, it really is a life-changing program. Oh, I like this question a lot. In fact, I was actually thinking about doing a video for a Sunday talk on this. If a person was induced or delivered by C-section, does that change their fate since the rising sign has changed? Okay, let's go back to this. I'm going to show you that visual again. Remember when I was showing you this earlier? Here, we're going to press play. We're going to zoom out. So let's just do a little meditation. Imagine that this is a visual metaphor for reality. There's no beginning, there's no end. There's just this. And absolutely everything is a part of this. Nothing is excluded. Nothing you can possibly imagine is excluded. And everything beyond what you can possibly imagine is included. Everything is in it. Everything is a part of it. So think about the meaning of this question if this is what is real. If a person was induced or delivered by C-section, does that change their fate since the rising sign is changed? A simple answer is there is no other way that anything can ever be other than exactly what it is. Thisness. Almost all mystics and all mystical traditions, when they talk about really elevated states of samadhi, they talk about this as a visual metaphor. There is no right or wrong time to be born. There is just birth. There is no more or less fate. There is no this or that fate. There is just fate. There is just this. This is fate. This is also permanently free. It is also at the exact same time permanently fate. There are ways of describing this. So everything we know and think about astrology, all the questions we ask, if we take the time to cultivate this kind of spiritual awareness and practice, it tends to answer all of our questions theoretically. It's the same reason that you'll hear me emphasizing going back to the philosophical roots of the language, because when you get to those roots and you understand how Venus is thought about as a core principle of that mandala we were just looking at, it changes your entire relationship to Venus forever. When you think about what astrology is meant to accomplish for the soul from within that mandala perspective, it changes everything. It changes how you think, it changes how you consume, it changes how you relate to astrology. Okay, I hope that helps. Top places you'd like to travel to that you've never visited. Egypt. Like top of my list. I'm super fascinated by Egypt. I'd really like to go to Japan. I'm just very attracted to Japan. I don't know why. And it's been that way for a really long time. I had a kid when I was a little boy in elementary school. My neighbor went to Japan and lived there for like 2 years because his dad went to graduate school there. And I was so enamored by everything he brought back. The furniture in their house became very Japanese. When he came home, they imported like a lot of furniture back home. And his father became my Eastern philosophy professor in college and talked a lot about his experiences in Japan. And so from the time I was a little boy to the very first professor who introduced me to Eastern philosophy, it was coming from a man and a family and a friend who had all been steeped in Japanese life. And something always has really called to me about that. I don't understand it fully. I just trust that there's, something there for me at some point. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Let's see, I'll just do a couple more and then we'll move along. Remember a few years ago when Saturn and Jupiter were conjunct? My boyfriend took me out that night, found a quiet spot to park, and we saw the conjunction perfectly in the clear night sky. Wow. Love that. That's super, super cool. Marco says most of us are alien souls. I like that. That checks out. Oh man. Whatever three-eye atlas is, it carries its own frequency, and it affects the frequency of our solar system and everything in it as it passes through. To which I go back to this. Like, to me, when I think about aliens or the vastness of the cosmos and all of the interesting things that could end up happening in this cosmos, I still can't see anything but this. It's all so interesting. Um, it's all so beautiful. But also, um, most of my all of my spiritual practices uh, bring me back to this space where there's really, like, three eye atlas to me has no more of a presence than a grain of sand in this. But I love having these conversations with you guys. This is super fun. And surprising depth of conversation today. Do you ever get anxiety about seeing a possible death in your transits or a loved one? Yeah, yeah. And usually then I I walk away. Walk away from the chart. Breathe a little bit, because there can be anxiety for sure. And I have seen deaths, and you know, certain transits, wild stuff can happen. But I think it's about allowing you, just kind of breathing into all those possibilities, saying, okay, well, whatever comes, there's nothing out of place here, and just really having to trust that. And also, take care of myself. If too much anxiety is coming up, then just like take a break. Maria says, I'm not alien. I have been here always from the beginning. Well, with such confidence, who could disagree? Okay. But Adam, we're looking at us going out there. Three-eye atlas is coming from out there in. And if the cosmos is alive in some way, the symbols have always come from the skies. Might be. For me, that's too literal. I don't think there's a difference between out there and in here. I think there's one level, there's one dimension in which we perceive an out there and an in here. But it turns out that those distinctions often collapse. Multidimensionality is a pretty crazy thing. This is very I Heart Huckabees right now. Totally. Everyone's going to get into the bag. Oh. Do you mean like shuffling tarot cards? Pull the top card. That card will always be exactly what you pull. I mean, you know what? I think I lost the context on this question. I think this actually occurred somewhat back in the stream. So if you want to recontextualize that, so I know what you're referencing, that sounds like an interesting question, though. Japanese here, it's an interesting country for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not someone who's like, I don't romanticize or idealize other cultures or places, but there's also no denying that some places really call to us or like have a pull on us. India was like that for me too, and I know now I know why, because I went there and it was really a moving, interesting place for me. What retreat center do you recommend did you attend? Well, I've been to a number, and I worked with a variety of different traditions. So it's not so simple for me to just recommend like one retreat center. Originally, I went to a place called Blue Morpho, but the indigenous curanderos who were there are no longer there. I think the founder, Hamilton Souther, is still there, but it's very personal who is going to be a good or not so good match. I was also in my early 20s, So I don't know. I feel like hesitant to recommend so much anymore. I do think Three Eye Atlas does have an effect in the sense that it's giving people a way to look into and perceive the world in a different way, kind of giving a Ten of Pentacles energy. Magic is everywhere. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? That something moving through the sky that has a lot of talk and speculation around it is can almost generate like a mass form of spiritual or mystical contemplation. I mean, that's certainly there's value to that. That's really interesting, isn't it? I agree with you there. Um, how would you compare ayahuasca to magic mushrooms or psilocybin? They're so different, but I mean, they're both healing. They're both medicinal, but their spirits are really different. It's like different people, different personalities. Ayahuasca for many people is sort of like a great giant serpent earth mother who's going to like wring you out like a wise grandma of like all your bullshit. She's very humbling and very wise and stern, but also really loving, really like a great mother. I think that's a great way of thinking about ayahuasca's personality. Interestingly, one of the first lineages I worked with conceptualized the spirit of ayahuasca as a great grandfather. So I actually worked with a indigenous lineage whose way of thinking about ayahuasca, it's like personification was masculine, not feminine. But then I worked later with tradition that was feminine. I personally find that ayahuasca is more feminine. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not sure how much that matters when much of what it's doing is a opening realms that many different things and beings can come through to speak and work with us for healing and wisdom and so forth. Mushrooms to me are like there's a little bit more of a trickster energy with mushrooms. They're more like squishy and bouncy, and there's like a little bit of a devious, like almost like just like a trickster energy to them in my experience. But also very wise, kind of a little bit more spacey too. Like I feel like something about the mushrooms to me feels very alien. Speaking of aliens, all of these things I don't recommend doing without guidance, supervision, real care, sensitivity about set and setting. Just for the record. The way you're talking about the video you're sharing for meditating, tarot cards, playing blackjack, poker, every next card that is pulled or that you ask for will always just be. Yeah, and the point is that the just be-ness of it for ancient mystics, and I'm talking about, from Taoism to yoga philosophy to Buddhism to Western esotericism, is frequently talked about as it's not an either or. It's not faded and it's not free. Those are just like a dualistic way that we have of talking about the exact same thing. Because this thing, as so many of the ancient mystics said, is outside of time. It's eternal. So, all of the relative ways we have of talking about phenomena or life, eternal, is relative. And so the dualities of fate and free will, could it be this way or could it have been any other way? They're more like ways that we have of relating to something than descriptions of objective truth. My father was stationed in Okinawa before I was born. He decorated our house with 1960s Japanese. He had the coolest Japanese swords hanging on our living room wall. Oh, that's really fascinating. Yeah, I just like as an aside, like one of my favorite hobbies is I just since I was maybe like COVID, I revisited playing video games with the Breath of the Wild, I think it was Zelda. And so occasionally I'll play a video game, and it's just a way of like getting into a totally different world and kind of reconnecting to my boyhood, I guess. But I love Miyazaki, all of his Souls video games, and just I love a lot of them are inspired by Japanese art and folklore and stuff like that. So anyway, there's different levels at which this stuff has come into my life. Have you ever tried Salvia divinorum? Yeah, Yeah, had some salvia experiences early on in my exploration of these things, and they were really, really powerful. In fact, one chapter of my book is loosely based on a salvia experience, though I sort of blended it with um, a mushroom experience. But it was actually some of that story is actually rooted in a salvia experience. That's a part of the book that's coming out. I watched an episode of Know Thyself with Dr. Robert Gilbert. He had the same feeling about Japan. If you don't know his story, check him out. Oh, that's cool. It sounds like you don't order mushrooms on your pizza. Yeah. Um, I love, by the way, that these things are becoming more acceptable. There was a time, when I first got into ayahuasca where family, friends, anyone and everyone thought that what I was doing with ayahuasca, I mean, I started working with ayahuasca in 2004. So, you know, back then it was not really a big thing yet. And people, I was treated by some people very poorly who now would probably microdose. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So it's wild to think about all that. Random. Thoughts on secondary progressions used in readings. Great technique. Love it. I like using progressed lunation cycles. I'm about to hit my progressed um, new moon in like 8 days. I'm really excited. It's been a balsamic moon phase for a couple of years for me. Do you know any example in history where the common people were manipulated to fight for the wealthy over class? I'm not sure. I'm if this is connected in some way to astrology or not. If you could make that clear for me. Otherwise, I'm really not like the world's greatest historian. So I won't comment unless there's some kind of astrological context. When does year one start? What day, week, time? I'll close with this question because we've been going about 2 hours, and I'll leave it here for the day. The year one class starts on November 15th. Really exciting. I'm super stoked to start a new section. It meets on what, Saturdays? Is that the 15th? Yeah, sorry. We have two different sections, so I was just making sure I got the right one. It meets at noon Eastern to about 2 p.m. Eastern, or 11 Central to 1 p.m. Central. Typically classes are 2 hours, but sometimes go all the way up to 3, even 3.5, if our Q&A sessions are going really long with a topic that is more complicated or difficult. Usually 2 hours is pretty common, though. They meet live via webinar on Saturdays. We'll typically have like a unit will be 2 or 3 classes on a specific topic. And then there'll be a week off where you could choose to attend the study session and tutoring or not. And then we start the next unit, and it rolls on like that throughout the year. And then sometimes breaks for holidays or if I have to travel or something. Yeah. Oh, Shirazad is here. Studying with Adam will change your life. He's the best astrology teacher out there for sure. This is your sign to sign up for year one with Nightlight. Thank you. Really appreciate you, Shirazad. One thing that we're passionate about, and she's a great example, is giving people opportunities to work on the platform, to develop their voice, to read for us in the reading clinic. The people who go through all of our programs and stick around tend to get involved at Nightlight. And we want that because I really feel like it's my responsibility as an astrology school to help grow the success of other astrologers and the larger community and tradition. And I want people who come through our program to feel that too, and carry this torch forward and give it to other people, and keep the tradition alive and well, and keep it smart and thoughtful. That's the hope anyway. So, okay, well, that's it for today. I really appreciate all of you for being here and asking such wonderful, rich, thoughtful questions. And please don't interpret any of my passionate responses as criticism for any of the questions you're asking. They're all perfect. They're all divine. And any question that you ask and any response I give, it's my hope that it will be inspiring, thought-provoking, and helpful in your process. So I'll leave it there. Thank you guys. Have a great weekend. I'm doing a live stream next Friday with Venus Pluto horoscopes, by the way, at 10:30 a.m. So you'll see me here next Friday as well. And usually toward the end of the year, as the Kickstarter gets rolling, I'll be doing somewhat more regular live streams like I do every year. So see you again soon, everyone. Take it easy. Bye.